Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Haynes.
And I am Trenton Bennett.
We are audiobook narrators, and this is part of a series called Narration, Matt and Trenton Tips. The topic for these tips that Trenton and I are going to cover with this short video is
How to do character voices that don't beat up your voice.
so Trenton, tell me about your experience with this.
I was so excited when I landed Rust over there by Corbin Burnson, and I tried to come up with a voice that was a little bit closer to his. And unfortunately, we don't have the same voice. And at the time, I was new enough that I didn't think about it. It was outside of my range, and it beat me up. I had to take things in smaller stints because trying to do that slight rasp to his voice hurt. And that was my
Right.
first lesson of wait, don't do that because you're looking at a 6+ hour audiobook. You can't do that because in the long term, you will damage your voice and you will not be very happy about that. But in the short term, the entire thing is harder to carry. And imagine if that book had a sequel or a trilogy and you had to continue to do that. So the important thing is don't make that commitment from the beginning. When you unpack a voice that you come up with, make sure it's one that's easy on the instrument, as they say.
Now, so we're not just talking about like narrating a couple of characters in the voice. We're talking about narrating the whole book in this voice.
Well, what I'm talking about is just in general, and I say that because I did
Yeah,
recently learn this in a workshop with Johnny Heller, and they had made the point: do not damage the instrument. Do not do any voice that will damage the instrument. This was coaching that we got, but for me, the other bit that sunk in is if you're doing a book, no matter what the character is, when you're coming up with their voice, imagine that they might have a book of their own one day because you don't want to have that happen and go, "Oh, they've only got a few lines. I can make it rougher. It'll be okay." And the next thing you know, well, we're doing a whole book on that person. And now you're kind of committed because your listeners are expecting the voice that you gave them.
yeah, absolutely. And the phenomenon that I learned that I was engaging in that tore my throat up is vocal fry. You're familiar with that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So can you explain to folks what vocal fry is?
When you speak in a range that's not your natural, comfortable speaking voice, you will cause your voice to crack a little bit, especially when you put it under stress. And so it may sound a little bit rough. I'm exaggerating, but you get the idea. It's
Yeah.
it's not comfortable.
It's got that creaky door sound, or
Yes.
I call it almost like ice cubes going into a Pepsi. There's that kind of sound to it. What you're talking about, Trenton, is great, not just because of character voices that naturally do that, but also the idea of overreaching for me. Overreaching to nail a character voice, but it ends up making me so tense and tight that that I'm in a position where it's not serving me, and ultimately it's not serving the narration. Um, there isn't a whole lot sometimes that needs to be added to my own voice that can create a different character. So, for example, if a character is talking, they say the character has a raspy voice. Well, that could be where rather than "I don't know what you want," which is big, big, big rip, it could simply be "I don't know what you want," which
Yeah,
comes
you
out,
soften it.
you soften it, right? And the other thing to keep in mind to protect the throat is whatever can be played in the nasal cavity, to use that as the projector. I learned that in singing. So I'll take that, you know what you want, and see if I can project it even more. You know what you want. Now that's not hurting my throat as much, and it's still got a little bit of the rasp to it. But remember, folks, that we're not trying to show people just how incredibly impressive we are with doing voices that sound nothing like our own. What we're trying to do is just give a flavor of another character, because ultimately the listener is there to listen to the writer's work. Trent, any other tips or advice for protecting the throat with character choices?
Absolutely. I think you hit on something earlier there that has to do with the position and the tension of the muscles. When I have to modify a voice, I had one character who's a submarine captain, and I wanted to give him a little bit more of a congenial sound to his voice. So what I'm doing right now is actually in the back of the nasal passages, and it's not rasping my throat, it's using the sinuses. But I also mention that because when I do different voices, I'm watching my head, so I'm not doing this or straining. I have to try
Hmm.
to remember to stay fairly steady. And so typically, if I'm not gesturing while I act because I record standing up, I am at
Right.
least having my hands down to my side so that my body is neutral. And I try to pay attention so I don't find myself stretching or moving because that too puts you in a position where you're putting strain in here.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's our Trenton tips and Matt tips for the week. If we were helpful in this video, wonderful. If you found that we weren't, comment with your questions about narration. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.